Hi, my name is Patrick Faulkner. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, this will be the third and final video of the Fender Twin, the Silverface Fender Twin that I've been modding and working on. I completed the amp. Everything's where it needs to be at this point. Playing it, it's been out for about a month. So this is kind of like the follow-up to all of that, the final kind of touches that I was doing. So if you're interested, stick around. It'll be a little bit long, and I have a bunch of different parts to it, and so I hope you enjoy it. If you're working on an amp or you're thinking about working on an amp, this is actually probably the best video to watch, just because it has all the changes that I actually made to the amp in this one video. So hopefully that's helpful. Anyways, let's roll that footage. Okay, so in this next bit, it's kind of explaining what's going on. So this is a negative bias cap, I believe, and it's taking the signal coming from the trem circuit. It's off to the right, you can't see it here, but it comes into here and goes to ground, and it's varying kind of how the trem interacts with the bias of the amp. And so this design is like a 1971, like a late to mid to late Silverface kind of design. And so it's not a true bias, it's actually a balance control. And I've left it intact so far. I had this left over from when I was redoing the caps, the filter caps. So it's 100 microfarads at 350 volts. It's fine. It's not going to hurt anything using a cap that big. It's just way over spec'd. Like it's unnecessary to be there, but it can be. And when I did that, it helped get rid of some of the tick from the trem that was leaking. I assume it's leaking to the output tubes. That much I don't know, but I know that there was an issue with the trem circuit, and so replacing this helped kind of resolve that. But what it doesn't do is, I think this design is just kind of inefficient, and in so doing, it introduces more problems into the design of the amp than are really necessary. So also there's a huge amount of solder right here, I just noticed. I'll try and get rid of some of that. So I think this is really where I'm ending up. So since we're dealing with reverb issues, I figured now would be a good time to check the ohms. So I'm going to switch my multimeter to its lowest setting. And we'll check the input. My book says the input should be somewhere around 0, 5, 6, 10. So that's pretty close. 1, 2 ohms. That's about right. And the output, it should be around 200. So it's at 175. So that's pretty close. That's about where it should be. So this should be working. Okay, so this is the doghouse. Originally, when I got this amp, this was actually the first thing I did. I replaced these. These are all the stock values. These are F&T caps. Between these and the Spragues, they're the most used, I think. These ones were half the price of the Spragues, and I'm not sure that they're going to be half as good. So I went for these. This is a kind of a budget thing at this point. The other thing that I noticed were I put these are the original values. They were looking for 2.2K and a 10K power resistors up here. I believe this is regulating voltage to the preamp, and I can't remember what this one is, but it's like setting voltage inside the amp to to see how much power is going through it, and those values are way higher than what I found in the blackface circuits. The blackface is a 4.7 and then a 1K, so way higher, and it's probably why this amp was kind of squishier. Those values are closer to what you would find in a deluxe. The older deluxes were using two 10K resistors here, and so I think that's one of the reasons why the amp is so squishy. So this, helped clean up the amp a little bit more and just gets it a little bit closer to that blackface kind of sound. These are all the stock values that it should be. So that's good. And I also replaced the 220K resistors down here. But getting these values is getting this amp closer and closer to where it be. I also noticed that on the resistors biasing the power tubes, those resistors are getting more volts. It was something like 300 volts on the right side and then 260 volts, which before they were like 280 and 250, and then it was 290 and 253, 255, and now it's up a little bit higher. So I think the amp's going to have a little bit more clean headroom and just be a little bit more snappy, and just sound more twin-like. So that's good. So there's noticeably less noise now because I've gained the amp down a little bit, I think. Showed it yet. I'll probably make another piece. I got the resistors for the bias circuit to be 100K and an 82K. And it really responds to humbuckers. I almost think I need to lower that pickup if I'm going to be playing this amp more. This on right now. Alright, so I replaced these resistors here. I'm not going to stick my finger in this because I haven't dumped all the voltage out of the amp. So make sure you're careful. So right here, these bias resistors, I replaced those which helped a lot. What else? But the next thing, and you can kind of see it. Oops, sorry. The next thing I'm gonna do is over here. You can see this resistor and that resistor over there, and that pot. It has a 15K resistor on it. All that kind of stuff. I think I'm just gonna put the adjustable bias circuit in there. I think I'm just gonna get rid of all that. And then you see that cap right there, that disc cap. There's a 220K underneath that orange drop. I'm going to get rid of that. That seems to be jumping some of the high frequencies out into the negative feedback loop. I don't see that even in the 70s, even in the other 70s non-master volume twin. Those components aren't there at all. So even if I leave it like this with the adjustable bias, I'm fairly certain that that's still going to be a safe thing for the amp. And if you want, let's even test it to make sure that we're still at negative 50, about negative 52 volts down here. All right, so let's take a couple of readings. Let's ground it, and then this should give us our negative bias voltage. It's actually a little bit high. It's higher than I remember it being. So negative 55. So they're the same. So that's a good thing. But it's a little bit high. So that's why I want to put the adjustable bias circuit in the amp so I can bring it down. It should be at 52. It's at negative 55 right now. So it's a little too high. That's what we don't want. And then if you tried to take your volt reading here, you actually can't. This will be around 300. You can't because you have to apply the high voltage. So you got to flip up. That means you have to flip up the standby switch in this amp. Not every amp. It'll pop when you touch it a little bit. It's not a big deal. So what are we reading at? Should be about 300. So yeah, we're at 310. And then this side's a little bit lower. It's at 270, 271. So that's good. We're doing pretty good there. And they use different values down here to match the power, because it's getting it from two different places. I don't remember exactly, but it's getting the power from two different places, and the voltage is slightly different. And so they use different resistors to try and match that, so then the power that goes in to the rest of the amp is more similar. So that's why when we're over here on the negative bias circuit, we're getting the same value because we've adjusted these down here. Previously, it was either the same values, and so one side would have been hotter than the other. So this gets us a little bit closer. I want to take out this disc cap and that 220K resistor down there, and then I actually want to replace the rest of the bias circuit and get it set so I can adjust it, because at this point that's actually going to start destroying tubes, I think, or it's not going to be running optimally. The amp sounds good. It's pretty quiet now, so I'm definitely going in the right direction. So I just hope you are enjoying the journey. So definitely worked some more on the amp. I had found two parts that I wanted to remove previously. It was a ceramic disc cap and a 220K resistor. They were both like sending signal back to the negative feedback loop, and I think it was the reason I was getting some like kind of a tick, because now there's just a little bit of high frequency buzz, which is kind of normal. It's an amp. Like, amps make noise. You can't assume that they're going to be totally quiet. But now it's so much less. And I have a lot of reverb on right now. If you remember before, the reverb was adding a lot of extra noise. Yeah, that's a pretty good amount of reverb. The amp itself now doesn't have that kind of a hum anymore. And so the only thing left, I think, to do now is to finish bringing it to like blackface specs and do an adjustable bias. I think if I went back with this stock 47K bias resistors in front of the 0.1 microfarad caps, I think if I went back to that, it would get the negative bias closer to where it should be. But I don't really want to do that. I actually just want to make it adjustable, so then when you put in a new set of tubes, you can just adjust it right there and be done with it. This particular amp doesn't have matched. They're matched probably, but it has two different sets of two tubes, and so I have two on the left and two on the right. I feel like that could also be part of the hum, because I know that the reason that we buy matched tubes is because there's some kind of hum cancellation that happens as the tubes are more closely matched, and when they get further and further away, it can't do that. And so the amp is designed to have them, and it can't it won't optimally work if they aren't. So this amp was trying to get rid of that. They're trying to give you just a balance adjust, so you can kind of balance it out to get rid of the hum between the tubes. And they're pretty close. I feel like the pot tends to be just kind of in the middle when I adjust it for hum. So yeah, pretty happy with it. Much closer to an actual twin. Okay, so here's the layout of this. This helped me a lot. The schematic helps for some things, and the layout helps for other things. And so this was super helpful because I can see where all the wires are coming in and where exactly everything needs to be going. So this helped a lot. So I'll kind of run through it, maybe not quite sequentially, but close. Okay, so the reason I'm using this schematic is because this is the amp that I really want. This is a Blackface Twin. This is the sound that I want for the amp for my friend. And so specifically, I can't use like an earlier one, like a Tweed, because the power, the way that this amp gets its power from the transformers, we have a diode rectification here, and I have 4 output tubes. Depending on the earlier twins that you get, they'll have tube rectification, so that's a different transformer type. It has extra taps. Yeah, so it's not close enough. It's not similar enough, so we don't want to use that. You'll also notice there's no master volume here. I removed the master volume circuit from that amp because I don't think Fender really put in the effort and the time to make a good master volume circuit. Later amps have good master volumes, fine, but this one it was terrible. And I'm not going to put another one in. It's not worth it for me. It's a clean amp. That's its job, and you just turn it up, and it sounds great. So it's fine. So what did I do? I left some things the same. I left these caps here, the base cap and the mid cap. Those are still the original blue caps. I don't really care so much about this normal channel. It's not a channel that I use a lot. I did, however, replace this 250 picofarad cap on the treble for the treble adjustment. It's a silver mica now, and it's actually 280 picofarads, so it makes the channel a little bit dark. So if you did decide to gain it up a little bit and like try to push it, I think it sounds pretty good. It's not how I use this amp, so it wasn't essential for me. I don't think I replaced these 100K resistors. I think I left those the same. They were fine. Um, and I really was focused on fixing this reverb channel. So kind of everything that I was dealing with was focused on getting this channel to be really good sounding, because this is the channel in the amp that I really use. So like I replaced these 100K resistors here. But anything that was like connected to a tube resistor wise, if it was directly outputted to a tube, I basically replaced them. You know, all the carbon comps in this amp are 40, 50 years old. And the current production resistors are going to be quieter and have higher tolerances. So I wanted to like future proof the amp as much as possible. So that was my initial thought, just servicing the amp. Um, so I replaced a lot of stuff like that, maybe unnecessarily. Some people might say, but this is the quietest Twin I've ever played. So I think it was worth it in the end to put in the extra time. The components are cheap, and as I worked through the amp, I was trying to show you as I worked through it, um, you can audibly hear how much better the amp sounds. And that's what I wanted. Because my friend's going to be using this for recording at his church. It needs to be super quiet, like above all else. It needs to sound good, but it also needs to be amazingly quiet. So that was kind of my thought process with that. I replaced the electrolytics here and the 1.5Ks. Originally, I'd bought carbon comps, and then I switched those out for new resistors. So they were much quieter. 100Ks. These ones down here for driving the reverb, I put in like massive, like 2 watt 100K resistors here. Um, I don't really, I was just like trying to overspec some stuff, and I knew that the reverb circuit was noisy, and I was trying to just check stuff off. Ultimately, I had to replace all of these capacitors. These ones down here as well. These caps, they actually appear differently on the amp. If you look inside the amp, they actually go to the outputs down here. The reverb output and the input, they actually get grounded. I believe they get grounded here. Not the way that this is written out. And I think they changed that from the Blackface amp to the Silverface, and I left that alone. That was fine. I didn't feel like that was an issue. But basically all the caps in the amp I ended up replacing. There was maybe like one or two, like this 0.1 200 volt. This was a hard one for me to find. And I ended up trying to patch two caps in its place, and it didn't work. It just didn't work. It was like the amp was about to blow up. And so I put the original one back in, and it was fine. I replaced these here. These were like 407. No, they were like 330K resistors. And I ended up putting in 1 meg and 1 meg. Yeah, the 470's in the middle, just like they have in the Blackface. I replaced all these caps here in the vibrato channel. I didn't put the bleed cap in. I probably should have. And I didn't put in a 25 at 25. I ended up putting a 5 microfarad electrolytic at 50. Originally, that's what it called for. And I didn't, at that point when I bought it, I wasn't so sure what I was going to do with the amp. And so I just left it. The vibrato is not that essential for me. And I'm sure if I put the 25 here, it would be a much better sounding vibrato. But I I don't use it, and if I did, I have it on my pedal board, so there's no need for me to go in and deal with the amp. So I replaced it and then left it the stock value and just moved on with my life. Down here, this is the more interesting thing. So if you I might even show this in even more detail. Um, the resistors and this kind of circuit right here for the bias, this was totally different. It's a balanced bias, which I talked about earlier in another video. Um, and so I ended up just mapping. I just took this. I got rid of, there was like a 220k resistor and then another cap that was like bleeding stuff into the negative feedback loop. I don't know why it was doing that. I felt like it made the amp. I don't know. I think Fender was trying to make something that was bulletproof. And when I looked at the 70s circuit, it was like you could just build it. You could put the tubes in, you could turn it on, it'll work, and you don't have to mess with anything. You don't have to go in and try and figure out why is this resistor here? Why are they using this value? Oh, the math isn't right. It was more like this is an amp we could mass produce super quickly and it'll work every time. Like that's the circuit that I was looking at, and it didn't matter optimal or not. That I don't think that was the point of that amp. They were just trying to mass produce something they could just send out with as little of repair and as little of issues in house as possible. And so that's why the caps I think were all over spec. They were like 1 kilovolt. Um, it makes sense when you think about it from that perspective, but at the same time, like if you're selling an amp and you want people to play it and buy it and whatever, it better sound good. And that I think was kind of the disconnect. So I had to reposition these caps here. They um, they like regulate the power coming from this tube here, and they get fried because they're getting the what is this, the phase inverter. They're getting fried from this tube, and so I definitely replaced these. All the amp guys I saw said you replace these and then you replace all the resistors on the output tubes. Don't even check them, just replace them. So I replaced these all with new resistors. These caps or these resistors here, I changed to the blackface specs 100K and 82K. Originally, I was like I think it was 47K, and it was biasing the amp really hot. So it was like 47 and 50 when I took my negative bias readings. Now, that isn't a truly accurate measurement because of the balance and blah, blah, blah. Like, I kind of figured that out. I needed to once I did the actual bias circuit, I could see that I could actually control how much power is being sent to both the tubes or to all the tubes here. And so then that was a much more accurate reading of the amp. Um, and I ended up biasing the amp like at minus 61 or 65 volts. Like I made the amp actually a little extra cold. Um, the minus 47 and 50 and 51, and the schematic I believe says minus 52. Maybe it even says 54, I don't know. But I wanted it at 65 when I biased it. I was like, "Hey, this sounds good. It's quiet, which is essential, but the amp still felt good." I didn't have the 27K resistor that the pot asked for. I ended up going with, I tried, I think, a 31, and that was too low. So then I switched it to 22, and that got me at adjustable. So I could take it up past 50 or close to 50, I think, somewhere around there, 48 or whatever it was. And then I could take it all the way down to like minus 70. So it gave me a really good sweep. So that was good. The tricky part was detaching the the wire that goes to the trem circuit. Here there's like another cap and there's like a little bolt, and I think it actually goes to here to ground. That was a little bit tricky because I didn't really know where it needed to go. And so this was super helpful seeing how all this laid out. So that wire is here for your for your trem circuit, and then this wire here is the bias circuit. And so that those two things get jumped right here. There's like a little jumper, and this look exactly the same as the amp. I was a bonehead when I made this video and I didn't record it because when I finished it, I was like, no, I got to try this. And I put it all back together thinking I was going to take it apart, and I never did. I brought it back to my friend, and now it's at his church, and I'm not going to take it apart to make a video of something that you can clearly see in this layout. So those were my things. What else did I do? This ground switch, I pulled that out. I put in a new power cord. Well, I kept the original, but I fixed it. These caps here. Oh yeah, right here. So this is like the recovery stage of the reverb. And so you'll see a 470K and a 3.3 meg resistor. I replaced this 10 picofarad silver mica cap, and there was another cap. It was super loud. When I would touch it, I think it's this 0.1 down here. Man, that thing was so microphonic. That got rid of so much of my noise problem. And you could kind of tell because once things started getting out of spec, like under the doghouse, all those caps were leaking. They're like dumping extra voltage that's supposed to be filtered into the amp. And so all the other components are getting pushed on higher and higher and harder and harder, and they eventually fail. And so because of that, a lot of these other caps were dying. And then this right here, this little bridge, there was like a 470K resistor, and then I had another 470K resistor here, and then I had a 10K resistor going to ground. And now I think that was because of the master volume circuit that was initially in the amp. And so when I pulled that out, I didn't think to take this section out. So as I noticed here, I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I also replaced that resistor with this 220K resistor going to ground. If you do it on the amp, again, these caps and resistors won't be here. They'll be running to the pedals or the reverb outputs. They'll be grounded down here. Don't worry about that. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just they changed the way it was going from the blackface to the silverface. Fine. Didn't cause me any problems. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else I missed. I mean, no, that's pretty much it. These diodes, I checked them. They all seemed fine. The standby switch I still have. The AC switch I still have. I ran these wires directly to the AC switch or to the fuse and then to the switch. I didn't use this ground switch or the death cap anymore. That stuff was all removed, and I just wired the 3-prong cable directly to the fuse. Pretty much, I can't really think of anything else. I did check a lot of the voltages, as you're going through the amp. Make sure you check your voltages. Make sure there's nothing like wildly out of spec, because then you'll know like, oh, that might be a problem. Oh, this might be a problem. I used orange drops just because they're good quality. They maybe aren't the best, but I didn't really need the best. I like the silver micas. They sound really good. And if you look at this blackface, the caps only need to be up to 400 volts. So because I blackface the amp, I feel like the 500 volts on these silver mica caps is perfect. I would even leave it on a 70s one. They're over-spec'd at 1 kilovolts. I don't think that's necessary. But yeah, so after this, you'll hear me demo the amp. And so I hope you enjoy it. Let me turn the reverb up a little bit more. I'm still using a true single coil. I'm not even in split mode or in position 2. So quiet. So quiet now. I mean, I've gone through this whole amp at this point. It's basically completely rebuilt. There's a couple parts that, now that I've done the bias circuit, the trem, I heard a little chirping. A little bit of delay, which will work with this setup because I'm using the amp is clean. I'm not trying to really get any gain out of the amp.